Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com, and it is time for a new news roundup podcast. We will be covering some of the recent headlines in both the Microsoft Business Applications and cloud space. Once again, I am joined by our assistant editor, Eamon McCarthy-Earls. Hey, Eamon, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jason, great to be here. And obviously, we've had quite a bit of news over the last several weeks, leading off with Microsoft Ignite at the end of September and all kinds of other developments in the in-between. So we'll have lots to talk about today.
Yeah, we are long past due to do another kind of roundup edition here, so I'm glad to get started. This episode of the MSDW podcast is sponsored by Provance. Did you know Dynamics 365 is the ideal platform for ITSM? Powered by Dynamics 365, Provance ITSM leverages Dynamics' rich capabilities to provide modern, flexible, and cost-effective IT services. Support a digital transformation in IT with Provance ITSM, the most Microsoft-centric IT service management product on the market. For more information, visit provance.com. That's PROVANCE.com.
Well, one of the things we have kind of as a starting item is a look at some of the cloud and edge model developments for Dynamics 365 supply chain management, which is headed for preview right now. Jason, could you tell me a little bit more about what's being announced by Microsoft in that category?
Right. So this was one of the, I would say, the highlights of the new release wave, the release wave 2 for 2020 for Dynamics 365 supply chain. And it is something that has been, it was in the headline, but years in the making, the introduction of a real hybrid model for the supply chain product. It's something that I think they really did need. They've been avoiding it for years now because they just didn't seem to have a solution to this challenge. And apparently now they do. It's the idea that certain workloads can exist, either on premises or in a separate location in the cloud, maybe perhaps an Azure data center, but closer to sort of the physical facilities that an organization runs. And there's two particular workloads for that, for warehousing and for manufacturing workloads. And I imagine it's something that a certain subset of both the AX customer base and probably new prospects have been asking for, and has been forcing them to hold back, because it's really a practical matter. If companies felt like they couldn't get away with sort of the cloud architecture that Microsoft has prescribed for D365 supply chain as a pure SaaS, pure cloud option. So I think it was probably long awaited, and I think the real question now is how much uptake it'll have. But it's an interesting architecture. It's one that really relies obviously on Azure capabilities, as well as I suspect some new computing options or computing advances that the business apps team has probably come up with in conjunction with the Azure folks to make it all work.
Well, I know one of the things that was really interesting to note at Ignite was the continued focus on sort of cloud overlap with other systems, and that was very prominent in discussions about Azure. So Microsoft signaled quite a bit of focus on multi-cloud and multi-edge capabilities. And I know you also reported on some of the overlaps between Dynamics 365 and Power Platform when it comes to Azure.
Yeah, it was an interesting reveal there about just how much Azure Scale is being used when it comes to Dynamics 365 and Power Platform. And it was an interesting, sort of an interesting look. One of the things that got my interest about it was I think there were some never before shared, perhaps, stats about how the architecture works. And it gets into, some of the things that I think maybe you would expect about the use of Azure SQL Database and the sort of scale at which the scale at which Azure SQL databases are run to support common data service instances. I think it's like over a million instances or something like that. And, the Elastic Pools, they've adapted their own sort of sort of management tooling and management applications layers above the sort of the core Azure tools. There's something called Spartan, which has an API layer for taking care of database operations. There's microservices. And I think what the thing I would take away from this is just sort of the signal that it sends that, in fact, the business applications team has some very serious architecture challenges and architecture experts who sort of work right alongside their Azure counterparts. I think it's a very reassuring. If I was if I was a prospect for business applications and I saw this, I think it would give me comfort to know that, Microsoft, who I think organizations might respect more or have more confidence in, and sort of as their sort of pure cloud infrastructure and platform needs, also has sort of this pedigree that they're applying to their business app. So I think it was a smart article for them to put out, and I certainly appreciated seeing a little bit of the insight there.
One other thing that's been interesting to follow is the developments around Azure Auto Manage, which is a newly launched service announced back at the end of September during the Ignite conference, and it's been in public preview since the end of September with some kind of interesting capabilities. We had a chance to speak with a few different users of the new offering and get kind of their perspectives on things. So I recommend that anyone interested in learning more about Auto Manage and its capabilities, go ahead and check out that article. Additionally, we also had some interesting coverage in the past month related to some of the industry developments around Dynamics 365, some interesting and kind of topical new announcements.
Yeah, so I did want to mention industry in general, and I think it's exemplified in three pretty big stories coming out of Microsoft in the last few weeks, showing that they are indeed serious, perhaps more serious than before, about their interest in making industry-specific solutions like sort of a core part of what they're offering for business applications. And so the three examples that I'm just going to mention here, one is the new partnership with C3.ai or C3.ai. Another one is the new fundraising and engagement for Dynamics 365 sales offering. And the third is Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare. It's another new industry-focused solution. These are all very different in terms of what they actually are, how they are being brought to market, what's actually in them. But each one is a really concerted industry-focused effort for the C3 AI story, which was the launch of C3 AI's own CRM that they're calling C3 AI CRM. It's really Dynamics 365, customer engagement apps with some of C3 AI's own operational platform tools on top of it, specifically focused on sales, marketing, service scenarios. But what it does is I think it really, and there's definitely some overlap there from what Microsoft offers out of the box with their business application suite in terms of customer insights, in terms of sales insights, and so forth. But it really accelerates it, and it gives Microsoft a chance to, kind of, I think hopefully in their eyes, broaden the footprint of what they can really offer when it comes to all sorts of different industries, so service industries and manufacturing and a variety of others. And so my sense is that that's a big deal for them. It brings in their very close partnership with Adobe, which analysts like Paul Greenberg have said is like one of the closest partnerships he's ever seen in the software space. So kind of bringing C3 AI into that, and of course C3 AI is sort of run and founded by one of the real true sort of originators of the CRM space in Siebel. So there's that. By contrast, fundraising and engagement kind of came out of, I guess what you would call a bit of an evolution, where the Microsoft Tech for Social Impact had sort of built tools, built starter kits around nonprofit work to overlay on top of Dynamics 365, and then partners could build out solutions for their customers. This is a fully built solution that the partners can just go to market with or build on top of. So it's really them stepping into that product space. So again, there's a sort of Microsoft product just for nonprofits. for fundraising and engagement. And there's even more coming, I think, on that. And then Cloud for Healthcare is different also because it's a full scale sort of across a vast array of Microsoft product teams here from the Microsoft 365, group with teams and, the Dynamics 365 or business applications team with, various things in there. And obviously some of the Azure services that tie into it. There's Azure's FHIR, is that the right acronym for the healthcare?
Yeah, so FHIR, it's pronounced a couple different ways depending who you talk to.
Yeah, and I know you've covered that before, but that plays into it. There's some other API management. There's I think some security elements. So it's like this big bundle of sort of pre-existing capabilities plus some additional stuff on top of it that Microsoft's selling kind of as a single I think almost like a monolithic. We'll have to see about that, but that's what I've been told. Sort of a monolithic Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare that you buy into. So big industry moves. I think it's a kind of thing that probably ticks off some ISVs to some extent, because if they really Microsoft tells all their partners to focus on industry, and then they go out and start marketing their own solution against probably quite a few of their partners. But that'll have to sort of shake out. I think there's probably plenty of room in the space for all of that. But yeah, I think, so that signals to me that they're probably not even done with it, with these industry type of offerings. I don't think they'll all come from the same place. They won't all look the same, but certainly it's an interesting time to be sort of paying attention to the industry focused efforts at the company.
Well, speaking of a very, very different kind of announcement, one thing we heard about recently from Microsoft is the launch of Azure Space, which is an effort to support the worldwide space industry, as they describe it. This involves an expanded partnership with SES, support for the O3b medium Earth orbit constellation, and work with SpaceX's Starlink offering to basically set up a sort of low latency satellite network connectivity network. Additionally, Microsoft is also launching the no pun intended in this case, the orbital emulator, which is going to be a way to simulate satellite constellations down here on Earth, so that companies can plan ahead for space operations. And additionally, this sort of ties in with some of the announcements we've heard about recently having to do with the modular data center, these mobile data centers, really for industries with a substantial kind of edge presence, things like telecom, agriculture, energy, and government, all of which need these very portable data centers for some of their operations.
Yeah, it certainly got a lot of people's attention. Perhaps another industry-focused effort, a very different one, very kind of cool and interesting, and something that seems like it's a little futuristic too, even at this point. But perhaps this will be like the norm, in certain industries, like you said, those industries that kind of need that kind of access, and in the future, fascinating stuff.
And Jason, you had a chance to learn about some of the recent Teams previews for Business Central, as well as some of the changes going on around Power Apps portals. So fill me in on some of that.
Sure. So let's start with the Business Central announcement. So Business Central sort of been, the team behind it has been, I guess you'd say, revealing details and guidance about what's next with Business Central for probably the better part of a month now, through different events, their own external events and so forth. And so one of the things that's very clear is that they are pushing to get Business Central sort of tied in with the other sort of big tentpole products at Microsoft. So one of those is Teams. And we did an article sort of looking at what that Teams integration looks like, at least the first iteration of it. And really it comes down to a kind of a neat little integration point where you can take a link from the standard Business Central web interface, paste it into Teams, and it basically creates a card with sort of native Business Central attributes and data from whatever sort of page you were on in Business Central. So if it was an item, it'll show that to you, and then you can even drill in more, and it's working with real Business Central data within Teams. So that's sort of like the beginning, probably like the first rung on the ladder, I guess, in a sense of what you can collaborate with other Business Central users on. I think there's a Business Central authentication element to it too, so you can't just start putting links into Teams and let anyone in the organization sort of work on it. I think there's a licensing limitation or something, but but it's sort of that first step. I think from there, even just this week, I was seeing one of the things that's coming next is the ability to search Business Central from Teams. So if you need to find an item, find a customer, a vendor, whatever, sales order, I think you can search on it from Teams and get the results in Teams pulling from Business Central. So I think we're going to see more scenarios like that. Things like document management, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm curious to see about things like, alerts and triggers, perhaps. Sounds like a reasonable area. Perhaps I think, integrating Power BI. And then, I think some of the demos I've seen also they just tie in Business Central alongside the other kind of key, tools that people use in their day, Power BI, Word and Excel, productivity tools, because you can touch all of those from Teams. So having multiple tabs inside of a team or something like that, that's where I think a lot of the realistic stories are going to start to happen. But I think it's an important first step for the Business Central team. Along with kind of the other one that stood out is sort of they do seem to be advancing their use of Common Data Service. I didn't have an article about that yet, but that's the other one I've been seeing in the time since even this Teams article came out, that there's a real push to start to make Business Central data available via Common Data Service using virtual entities. And so I think there'll be a lot more learning and updates on that as time goes along, and I think more people start to play with it too. Oh, and getting into the portals. This was sort of a small piece, but one I'm glad I found out about, and I have to tip my hat to Nick Hayduk from Engineered Code, who called my attention to this and other people's attention on one of his recent Portals community calls, which is a webcast he does monthly with us. And check our events page to find out for the next one, which I believe is in early December. But he mentioned that the Microsoft Principal Group Program Manager Dilip Singh gave an update at a Power Apps Portals focused online event recently, and he shared some of the momentum that they're seeing. He said they're seeing huge growth in the build up of portals. They're seeing tons more users. They're seeing a lot of sites that are being built using the new consumption model, and that consumption's going way up. So I think all good signs for the Portals product. Obviously, it's still a fairly new product in its current form since it evolved from ADX Portal, ADX Studio, and all that to become a pure Power Apps tool. So that's sign of health for them, I would say.
Something else that's been interesting is the general availability of Dynamics 365 project operations and sort of the implications of that for legacy users.
Yeah, this is one that does have an impact on project service, D365 project service customers. It's a confusing one to talk about, and so I won't. I would point people to the article itself for some of the details. But when you're talking about project operations, Microsoft project for Microsoft Project for the Web, and some of the evolution of things there. It reached general availability. It's now the thing that if you need project service, you're buying that instead of, you're buying project operations now instead of the old D365 project service. There's some licensing considerations, especially for existing finance and operations customers and for D365 project service customers, because project operations kind of brings in elements of both. And if you're transitioning to it, you'll have to really pay attention to what licensing you have today versus what you're going to have to buy to get to transition to project operations. I think it's a long-term consideration. It's not something Microsoft apparently is going to really force on anybody right away, especially because they still have a lot more work to do with project operations. Something I learned sort of in looking into this was that there's elements of it that aren't quite there yet, and that they're planning to deliver in the next 6 months, 12 months to really round out the offering. So if you're already on finance and doing certain things, you're gonna have to probably wait until those things are ready in project operations. So it's certainly not a story that is complete yet. Something you definitely want to keep your eye on, though, if it applies to your organization. But for new customers, it is out there, and it represents sort of a new phase in the project service industries offering from the Business Apps team.
Well, among many great feature articles we've had in the past few weeks, a few that I would just draw our readers' attention to include a few different pieces focusing on new features. So first on our list is a look at how to do successful implementations with Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations with RSAT from Vamsi Pranith Donapudi. Also a piece on how to post fixed bids and time and material-based invoices in D365 Finance and Operations from Project Operations by Kuldeep Gupta. And not to be left out, some guidance on the citizen developer success by Venkat Rao. All great pieces to check out among many others.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are all three of those authors have written multiple things for us recently. Venkat actually just finished a 5-part series. The last and final part just went up recently. I'm not sure if we'll link to, I think, the most recent of those. But yeah, those have been really well received. And I would invite anyone else in listening here, if you're really digging into the products and want to share what you've learned, write about it for us. We love that, and our readers really love to learn sort of firsthand accounts of like how to get the most out of these products, because they're changing so fast now with these 6-month updates. Everything from this Project Operations that we just mentioned, that Kuldeep has been diving into, to finance, supply chain, all these changes in Business Central. There's just so much to stay up on. All right. Well, Eamon, I think that gets us to the end of this update.
Great, Jason. Until next time.
Yep. Until next time. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Eamon, how about you?
Folks can reach me anytime at eearls@msdynamicsworld.com.
Excellent. You can also find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. And that's it for this time. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.